It was late. Not the kind of late where everything's dead silent, but the kind where cities hum quietly in the background. Traffic fading into nothing, lights blinking across apartment windows, life continuing in soft echoes. I came home around 11:30 after meeting an old friend. Nothing suspicious, just beers, conversation, and the kind of tired honesty that only comes when the air's too cool and the sky's too quiet to lie. I wasn't drunk, just thoughtful. A little off balance maybe, but not from the drinks. The apartment was dim. No TV, no background music. Just the light over the stove casting soft shadows across the kitchen floor. Brooke was asleep, or at least I thought she was. Her side of the bed was usually cold by the time I got back from anything social, even if it was just a grocery run. We'd stopped syncing up a while ago. I headed to the fridge for a bottle of water. That's when I saw it, her laptop, open, on the table. That alone was enough to stop me for a second. Brooke never left her laptop open. Never. It wasn't paranoia exactly, but she always said she preferred tidiness. Tabs closed, lid shut, files named in lowercase with hyphens like some control-freak web developer. It didn't fit the picture. And then I saw the blinking notification. A message window sat in the bottom corner of the screen. I wasn't looking for it. Honestly, I wasn't. But my eyes locked onto the last line previewed in the thread. If only he hadn't come back so early that time. The weight of it hit instantly. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. My thumb was still resting against the cold plastic of the water bottle. I know how this sounds. That I crossed a line. That I should have respected her privacy. But you have to understand, we'd been married for almost 6 years. And that one line felt like it cracked something. It was like hearing your name in a conversation you weren't meant to overhear. And once it's there, you can't unhear it. The sender's name was Nick. No last name. No profile photo. Not a familiar name in any family tree I knew of. Not someone from her office as far as I could recall. I hesitated. Told myself I'd just read one message. Maybe it was an inside joke. Maybe it was harmless. But I clicked. And I read. The thread was long. Weeks, maybe months long. The top of the chat had dates I didn't recognize. Not in any calendar Brooke shared with me. Their conversation unfolded like a novel you weren't meant to read. Soft, personal tones. Language filled with warmth and familiarity. There were messages about escaping the noise, about that one time in the mountains, phrases like, "You still smell like my blanket," and "I can't get that night out of my head." The kind of things you say when you miss someone you shouldn't. There were photos too. Not dirty ones. Worse, int asterisk mate ones. A selfie in a car I didn't recognize. Brooke in the passenger seat, hair messy in a way that only happens when you stop caring how you look. The kind of look she hadn't given me in years. He had his hand on the steering wheel, and she was leaning in, mid-laugh, like someone had said something too funny to keep inside. There was a hotel room picture. Bed unmade. His face in the mirror, shirtless, holding his phone. And underneath it, a comment from Brooke. "This makes me miss Thursday nights." Thursday. She always worked late on Thursdays. My chest felt heavy. I sat down without realizing it. The hum of the fridge filled the silence like a bad soundtrack. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shouting. But my body was reacting, slow and foreign, like it had entered some other gravity field. The world felt tilted. I took a screech asterisk T. Then another. Then all of them. I didn't know what I would do with them, but I knew I had to keep them. Not out of revenge. Not yet. But because I had the sinking feeling that soon, she'd pretend this never existed. I uploaded them to my personal cloud. One she didn't have access to. Then I closed the laptop as carefully as I could, just like I found it. Same angle, same screen brightness. I made sure the mouse was back where it had been. I even wiped the touchpad with my sleeve so my fingerprint wouldn't give anything away. Then I walked down the hallway and stood in the doorway of our bedroom. She was asleep, peacefully by the look of it. One arm flung over a pillow, breathing steady. Her phone was on her nightstand, plugged in, face down. I wondered if Nick's name was in there under something else. Lisa from work, maybe, or just initials. I'd seen her chuckle at her phone before, then locked the screen too fast. I thought she was watching Instagram reels. Now I knew better. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there beside her, blinking at the ceiling, counting seconds like they were lifelines. I kept imagining all the places they might have been. Kansas City, Denver, maybe the cabin in Michigan we always talked about renting but never did. Maybe she went there, just with someone else. In the morning, Brooke was her usual self. Light makeup, ponytail. She made coffee and read the headlines out loud like she always did. "Oh my God, did you see what happened in Miami?" She kissed me on the cheek and left her mug half full on the counter, just like always, as if nothing had shifted, as if the foundation hadn't just cracked clean through. I waited, tried to act normal, but eventually I asked. I didn't accuse. I simply said I noticed her laptop open last night, that I'd seen a message from someone named Nick and it seemed off. I gave her room to be honest. I gave her room to lie. She didn't flinch. She acted shocked, offended even, said he was her cousin, that they joked around like that I clearly misunderstood. The photos? Old. From years ago. Some road trip with extended family. She even smiled at the end, said something like, "God, you really need to stop overthinking everything." And maybe the worst part? Her lie was almost convincing. So clean, so calm, so well-practiced. I nodded. I said okay. But something in me didn't click back into place. Something fractured. I wasn't a jealous husband. I wasn't insecure. But I wasn't blind either. And I knew, deep down, behind the knot in my stomach and the ache in my chest, that the truth wasn't what she said. The truth was in the way she looked past me when she lied. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't an accident. This was something else entirely. After that night, it was as if something in my brain refused to shut off. I wasn't obsessing. Not in the way TV shows depict a jealous husband rifling through drawers or shadowing cars, but my mind had entered a new kind of alertness. A low, persistent hum of doubt that refused to fade. I started noticing the smallest things. The things I used to brush off as quirks or coincidence. They didn't feel innocent anymore. They felt calculated. The first thing I caught was her phone. It used to sit charging in the living room, especially in the evenings. She'd curl up with her wine and flip through social media while I made dinner or flipped channels. It was part of our rhythm. But now she kept it with her, always. She'd bring it into the bathroom even when she showered, which she'd never done before. Once it buzzed while she was brushing her teeth and I glanced over, just instinctively, and she snatched it like it had caught fire. Said something about a client with a weird deadline. Smiled too fast. Then there were her business trips. Brooke worked in marketing, so travel wasn't new. But the destinations started to change, and not subtly. The names she gave didn't match her calendar anymore. Once she said she was headed to Omaha for a client presentation. I believed her, until I found a reusable tote bag in her trunk from a boutique in Kansas City. Kansas City wasn't even in the same state. When I brought it up, she shrugged it off. Said the flight had been redirected. Happens all the time. I wanted to believe that, but then I noticed her fitness tracker didn't sync during that whole weekend. Her location services, the ones she used to forget were on, were suddenly disabled. She claimed it was to save battery, but the charger was always with her. Things spiraled quietly from there. I found myself playing detective in my own home, not out of malice but necessity. There was a night, early spring, when she came home late. Not unusual, she'd said it was a girls' night. But she walked in wearing a bright red dress, heels, and enough perfume to make my eyes water. It wasn't the outfit or makeup. It was the glow, that soft flush in her cheeks and the way she hummed to herself as she poured a glass of wine, like she was reliving something. I asked about the dress. She said she'd borrowed it from her friend Claire for the occasion. But Claire's a size 6, and Brooke's never been able to wear her clothes. I know because I remember the time she tried on Claire's coat and couldn't zip it. It hung in my mind like an unfinished puzzle. The little shifts kept building. She started saying no to things we used to do together. Friday night movies. Sunday hikes. She'd roll her eyes and say she was tired, that work had been crazy. but I began noticing she was always full of energy for things that didn't include me. Suddenly she had team dinners, strategy offsites, client wine tastings. But never a +1. Never a reason for me to come. She once told me she was going to a pajama-themed girls' night. I believed her until she came back at 2 a.m. wearing mascara and lipstick that hadn't faded. Her top was silk, not flannel. Her nails were freshly done. It didn't take a genius to figure out that no one wears heels to a sleepover. Another time, she went to one of our old restaurants, a cozy spot we used to visit on our anniversaries. I only knew because a receipt fell out of her coat pocket. It was recent, dated 2 nights ago. Just 1 appetizer and 2 entrees. A shared bottle of wine. I asked casually if she'd gone out. She said she ordered takeout. I nodded, but the restaurant doesn't do takeout. I checked their website just to be sure. They brag about it. In-house experience only. Then there were the names she used. The first time it really hurt was at a formal work dinner. Her team was celebrating a big win, and spouses were invited. I stood beside her, hand at the small of her back. She was radiant that night, in a midnight blue dress and soft curls. She introduced everyone around. But when she got to me, she hesitated, then said, "This is Jake, a friend. Not my husband. Not even my partner. Just a friend." I don't know if anyone else noticed the shift in my face, but I felt it like a slap. That one word tore something loose inside me. I stood there, smiling like a guest at my own funeral. After that, I started keeping a quiet record. Nothing dramatic. Just notes. Observations. A receipt here. A date there. Times, outfits, stories that didn't line up. One entry still sits heavy in my head. She claimed she had dinner with Lena, her coworker. But I'd seen the receipt she left in her jeans. The order had 2 cocktails. Lena doesn't drink. And a dish Brooke always says she hates, truffle risotto. That's not Lena's order. It wasn't even Brooke's. It was someone else's. Her perfume changed too. It used to be floral, something soft and citrusy. Now it had a musky undertone. Once it was mixed faintly with men's cologne. I asked about it. She waved it off, said, "That's Charlie. He gave me a ride. Must have rubbed off in the car." Charlie. He'd never come up before. That was the day I opened her glove compartment and found a cheap bottle of men's body spray tucked beside the car manual. The kind of spray teenage boys use. No reason for it to be there. It's amazing how quickly the brain rearranges memory when you stop forcing yourself to believe in good intentions. Suddenly, every shrug, every turned back, every cold response after I touched her shoulder became part of a pattern. It wasn't paranoia. It was clarity. I started sleeping lighter, waking up earlier, watching her instead of holding her. She stopped saying "I love you" without prompting. I stopped saying it altogether. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I didn't know if the woman I loved still existed inside the stranger sleeping beside me. The final shift came on a Tuesday afternoon. She called to say she was working late. Another last-minute brainstorm with the team, but something felt off. Her voice was rushed, clipped. She didn't ask how my day was. Didn't end the call with her usual "miss you." So I drove past her office. Not to spy, not really. Just to see. Just to know. Her car wasn't there. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Nothing. I drove around the block twice. No sign of her. No explanation later, either. She came home at 9 p.m. Hair brushed out, eyes bright. Said the brainstorm ran long. I nodded. But the seed had already sprouted. By then, I no longer needed a confession. The truth was speaking in everything she didn't say. In every glance away. Every laugh that wasn't shared with me. Every version of her story that kept changing just slightly, like a shifting reflection in a cracked mirror. I wasn't looking for more proof. I was waiting for the moment it would all collapse under its own weight. By the time the Chicago retreat rolled around, I'd already decided I wouldn't let Brooke's stories pass unchallenged anymore. I wasn't planning some dramatic confrontation. No accusations, no scenes. I just needed to see for myself. Needed that last piece, the one that would make everything real. Final. irrefutable. The invitation arrived by accident. We shared an email account once. A leftover from when we planned our wedding, used for RSVP tracking and Airbnb bookings. We rarely used it anymore, but it was still active. One afternoon, while I was clearing out spam, an event confirmation landed in the inbox. Northreach Group Spring Leadership Retreat registration for Brooke and guest confirmed. Guest. I stared at the word for a long time. She hadn't mentioned me. Not once. She'd said it was a tight team thing. Just a strategy weekend. No guests. No spouses. I didn't reply to the email. I didn't mention it. I booked my own flight to Chicago, checked into a nearby hotel, and waited until the retreat was underway. She didn't know I was in the same city. On the second night of the event, I dressed carefully. Nothing that stood out, but enough to blend in. Neutral. Background. I arrived at the hotel where it was being hosted around 7:30. The conference center was bustling. I moved through the lobby with measured steps, scanning the room like a ghost passing through someone else's life. Name tags, laughter, clinking glasses. The sound of people relaxing after long sessions of corporate jargon. I stayed at the edges, and then I saw her. Brooke was radiant, hair pinned up loosely, soft waves falling near her jawline. She wore a pale green dress I'd never seen. Satin with a slit up the side. She was barefoot in the first photo I ever took of her. And yet, somehow, she looked more like a stranger now than in that old Polaroid. She was standing near a tall man with sandy hair and sharp shoulders. I recognized him from LinkedIn, Logan Morrissey, Director of Strategy. The name had shown up on receipts and calendar blocks she'd forgotten to mention. They weren't touching, not then. But their posture was too familiar. Leaned in, sharing quiet jokes, his hand brushing her elbow lightly as they talked. I didn't interrupt. I stood behind a large potted plant near the bar, cliché maybe, but effective. From there I saw everything. Brooke had always been cautious, subtle, but that night she dropped the mask. When the music started, soft, live jazz, couples migrated to the dance floor. At first I thought she'd stay in the crowd. She didn't. Logan extended his hand, and she accepted it without hesitation. They walked together to the center of the room. The band played something slow, something warm, and then they danced. Not side by side, not friendly or professional. His hand was on the small of her back. Her fingers played with the buttons on his shirt collar. At one point, her head rested on his shoulder, eyes closed. The way people do when they trust someone. When they've done this before. I kept still, took slow breaths, felt like drowning but slower. No splashing, just the silent realization that oxygen is gone and you're still moving. Halfway through the song, I raised my phone and took a photo. No flash, just a still image, her dress, his hand, their closeness. I'd delete it later. I didn't need the proof anymore. It was already burned into my memory. As the song ended, I moved carefully toward the corridor that led behind the ballroom. A narrow hallway lined with utility doors and catering carts. It was dim, quieter, away from the crowd. Something told me they'd head that way. I was right. 5 minutes later, Brooke appeared. Logan was right behind her. She glanced around, too casually, and led him down the corridor. They didn't speak at first. Then she turned to him, smiled, and said something I couldn't hear. He chuckled, then leaned in and kissed her. Not a hesitant kiss. Not a first kiss. A kiss with history. Her hand slid up his chest, resting briefly at the base of his neck. He kissed her again. Longer this time. She didn't stop him. I stood there, half concealed behind a supply cabinet, watching my marriage end in real time. They straightened themselves, she adjusted her dress, and they returned to the ballroom. Logan entered first. Brooke followed a few minutes later, texting someone as she walked. Probably me. Probably something about the retreat being pretty boring. I left. Didn't say a word. Didn't confront her. Didn't scream or make a scene. I walked through the hotel lobby, past the revolving door, into the cold night. I didn't even realize I was crying until I felt the wind sting my cheeks. My hotel was 5 blocks away. I walked the whole way in silence. That night, Lying on a foreign bed with a stiff pillow and the city humming outside, I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. Every thought that passed through me carried a weight I couldn't unload. I kept replaying the same moment. Her eyes closed on the dance floor, her smile in the hallway, his hand moving with confidence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't office flirtation. It was betrayal, full and deliberate, and I wasn't confused anymore. She had chosen this. The next morning, I checked out without breakfast, booked an early flight, didn't send her a message. I turned off my location sharing, let her think I was still at home, none the wiser. When I arrived back, the apartment looked the same. Still neat, her shoes by the door, a coffee mug in the sink. That cruel trick of normalcy, as if nothing had shattered. She called me around noon, said the event was too corporate, and the hotel food was terrible. She made a joke about someone falling asleep during a branding seminar. I responded with short sentences. She didn't seem to notice. I didn't mention I had been there, that I'd seen everything. I needed time. Time to think. Time to pull myself out of the fog of denial. Time to decide what came next. Because from that moment on, I wasn't trying to save the marriage anymore. I was preparing to bury it. And I'd already *N digging the grave the moment I saw them together. Not just touching, not just kissing, but moving like people who had nothing to hide from each other. People who once cared about hiding wouldn't act like that. But Brooke didn't care anymore. And now neither did I. When I returned from Chicago, I no longer saw Brooke as my wife. That sounds harsh, but it's the only way to describe the numbness that took over. She was still there. Same laugh, same scent, same way she used her fingers to twist her hair when she was distracted. But I had crossed a threshold. Something inside me had burned away. Not rage, not even heartbreak. Something colder. A kind of silence where there used to be hope. Brooke came home 2 days later. She threw her bag by the door and sighed like the weekend had drained her. I watched from the kitchen. She leaned against the doorway and said something about a delay at the airport. I nodded, didn't press. She never suspected I had been there, that I had watched her kiss another man 2 corridors away from her colleagues, that I had stood still while everything that used to hold meaning disintegrated in front of me. She kissed my cheek, told me she missed me. That moment I began building my plan. It didn't look like revenge. Not from the outside. I wasn't slamming doors, shouting, or delivering ultimatums. No screaming matches. No accusations. I was quiet, collected, but everything was shifting behind my calm expression. I started small. Changed the password on our shared cloud drive. It used to store our tax documents, travel itineraries, scanned IDs. I created a private vault, one only I could access. I moved copies of our mortgage documents, our prenup, financial statements, health insurance files, even our wedding photos. Not because I needed them all right away, but because I knew one day soon, she might try to pretend this life wasn't shared once. Then I created a new bank account. One with no connection to the joint one we used for groceries and subscriptions. I rerouted my direct deposit there. Transferred over small amounts from savings carefully, bit by bit, so it wouldn't raise questions. By the time she noticed, if she ever did, it'd already be too late to follow the trail. Next came the digital audit. I went through every shared subscription, Netflix, Amazon, Spotify, our cell phone plan, and pulled logs. Activity times, devices used, orders placed. I wasn't looking for more proof of infidelity. I already had that. I was mapping behavior, patterns, understanding who she was when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Every purchase had a fingerprint. Every digital breadcrumb told a story she hadn't spoken out loud. The data spoke louder than she ever had. I noticed something strange. A recurring charge to a flower delivery service. Not the one I used on anniversaries, a different one. Less local, less romantic. She never mentioned getting flowers. Never posted about them. I never saw a vase in the trash. So I checked their site and called customer service, pretending I was verifying an order I might have placed for my wife. They confirmed a dozen deliveries, all to the same address. A corporate office downtown, signed anonymously. I didn't ask for the sender's name. I already knew. Logan. The same man I saw hold her waist like it was familiar. The one she danced with while pretending I didn't exist. I began compiling everything into a file. Quiet dossier. Not for blackmail, not for courtroom drama. Just for me. For clarity. Screensh *TS of messages. Photos from Chicago. Records from the flower company. Her calendar entries. Matched against actual locations. The GPS logs from our car app. I had access. She'd forgotten. She never turned off the history. I created a timeline. Not out of obsession, but precision. It was easier to heal with facts. Meanwhile, Brooke tried to pretend nothing had changed. She kissed my forehead every morning. Asked about my meetings. Laughed at reruns of shows we used to watch. I played along, but inside I was elsewhere. Already gone. One evening, I watched her rehearse a speech in front of the mirror. She was prepping for some brand pitch. I stood in the hallway, listening to her talk about authenticity, loyalty, long-term vision. It was surreal. She didn't flinch once using words she no longer lived by. That was the moment I realized she had practiced lying. She wore it like a suit, tailored and professional. At night, I stopped reaching for her. She noticed, asked if I was tired, said I seemed distant. I told her work was heavy, which wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. I was working on an exit. Not from my job. From her. She still didn't see it. That was the thing about Brooke. She believed her charisma could keep everything in orbit. That she could cheat and charm in the same breath. That if she smiled the right way, no one would notice the knife she kept behind her back. But I wasn't blind anymore. I began recording audio clips when she made suspicious calls. I never used them. I didn't need to, but I wanted to have them just in case. Her voice had changed. Softer when talking to him. Sharper when talking to me. Like I was the static she had to tune out. One Sunday morning, she got a call while we were having breakfast. She answered it in the other room like always. I followed without being heard. She spoke quietly, but I caught the words, "I miss you already." When I stepped back into the kitchen, she returned seconds later and said it was Claire, needing help planning a baby shower. She was so used to lying that her smile didn't even twitch anymore. I smiled back, offered her another cup of coffee. Inside, I was already setting up the final pieces. I met with a lawyer, discreet, a friend of a friend. I explained the situation, laid out the documentation. She was impressed, said most clients came in with rage and nothing else. But I had clarity. She offered options. I picked the one that offered a clean cut. No war, just extraction. I reviewed the prenup. It was clear. No contest clause. No spousal support after infidelity, if proven. I had more than enough proof. Not just one night. A pattern. Documented. Undeniable. The law was on my side, but I wasn't planning to drag her through a courtroom. I just wanted to be gone before she even understood what happened. I began removing myself from her world piece by piece. Unsubscribed from joint newsletters. Removed my emergency contact from her insurance. Updated my mailing address to A.P.O. box. Each move was quiet, invisible, but every detail mattered. Every step was freedom gained. And all the while, she carried on like nothing had cracked. She still invited people over, laughed too loudly, clinked glasses at dinners like the house wasn't hollow. But I was already gone, emotionally, mentally, tactically. What remained of me in that house was a shadow waiting for the right moment to walk out. She didn't see it. She didn't feel it. But I was no longer the man she thought she had cornered. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to vanish, with everything she thought she controlled left in pieces behind me. It started with a whisper. That's how things fall apart in real life. Not with a bang, not with a final scream, but with something quieter, smaller. The first crack was an email Brooke never saw coming. Her company, Northreach Group, prided itself on maintaining a culture of transparency. At least that's what they claimed in every brochure, every onboarding document, every leadership summit. I always found the phrase ironic, especially once I saw what their culture tolerated behind closed doors. The email came on a Thursday. Brooke was in the shower, singing softly, a song I didn't recognize. I sat on the couch watching the inbox linked to her work email. She never remembered to log out on her tablet, and she rarely took it with her unless she had a presentation. There it was, an internal memo. Subject line, HR review, professional conduct concerns. It was addressed to Brooke, CC'd to the VP of Strategy and Human Resources. The language was formal, clean, but the meaning was clear. Someone had filed a complaint. Attached to the message was a notice that an anonymous report had been submitted with supporting documentation regarding inappropriate workplace relationships. She was being placed under preliminary review. She didn't know yet, but I did, because I had sent it, not under my name, not out of vengeance, but because the lie she built had metastasized into something that was no longer personal. She wasn't just betraying me. She was living a double life, infecting every space she entered with dishonesty. It was time to end the performance. The documentation I submitted was thorough, not excessive, just enough. *TS of the chat messages between her and Logan. A transcript of one voice memo, redacted to protect identities, but clear enough to suggest a level of familiarity no manager and subordinate should ever have. 2 photos from the Chicago retreat, one of them holding hands, another just seconds after the hallway kiss. I'd blurred their faces, but any insider could still recognize the setting. The hotel's logo was visible on a sign behind them. I didn't include everything. Not yet. I held back, just enough to let the system take its course. I wanted the first wave to rattle her. It worked. She came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, humming. I watched her sit on the bed and check her tablet. Her face changed in an instant. Her eyes stopped moving. Her posture froze. She scrolled, then scrolled again, then stared. Something wrong? I asked. She didn't answer, just said she had to call the office. Her voice cracked. She spent the next 3 hours pacing the bedroom, speaking in coded tones, whispering into the speakerphone like the walls had ears. Maybe they did. Or maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the realization that her carefully constructed version of herself had a leak, and it was flooding fast. That night, she didn't eat dinner. She sat at the table, picking at her plate, staring through me. I almost felt bad. Almost. The next day, things accelerated. Logan was suspended. Officially, it was termed a temporary administrative leave pending review of conduct. But Brooke told me the truth, or at least the version she thought I'd accept. She said Logan had been unfairly targeted by someone with a grudge, that there were rumors about a jealous coworker, that some of the accusations were completely made up. I listened. I nodded. I even played the part of the supportive husband for one last time. But I saw her hands trembling as she stirred her coffee. She was spiraling. A week later, Brooke was reassigned. They didn't fire her, not yet, but they pulled her off her flagship accounts, moved her to a different department. No client interaction, no leadership role, just digital strategy support, which in corporate speak is a padded exile, a way to strip power without filing paperwork. At home, the mask cracked further. She cried that night. Not the performative tears I'd seen before, the kind she used when she forgot an anniversary or ruined a vacation. These were wild, broken sobs. She clutched a pillow on the couch like it was a life preserver, told me everything was falling apart, begged me to believe her, said it was all a misunderstanding. She told me the photos were out of context, that Logan was too affectionate, that she hadn't encouraged it, that people were twisting the narrative to destroy her career. She said she needed me, that I was the only one she could trust. But trust was already gone. And she was talking to a man who had already packed a backup bag and locked it in the trunk of his car. When she asked if I could speak to someone at the company on her behalf, to confirm there was nothing romantic, I didn't flinch. I told her I couldn't lie. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. But something inside her collapsed. The part of her that believed she could still control the story. She looked at me like I was someone else, a stranger who had walked into her life wearing her husband's face. And maybe she was right. I wasn't the man she married anymore. Because the man she married had believed in her, defended her, loved her without armor. Now I was armor, and calculation, and silence. She spent the next few days making calls, whispering to friends, trying to build a version of the story that absolved her. She said it was workplace politics, that Logan had always made people uncomfortable, that the photos could have been doctored. I listened to one of her calls from the hallway. She didn't even check if the door was closed. She said I was overreacting, that our marriage was fine, that people always read too much into harmless connections. I took notes, not because I needed more proof, but because I wanted to remember the exact words she used to dig her own grave. By the end of the week, she was unrecognizable. Her hair was pulled back tightly, like she was trying to control at least one thing in her life. Her clothes changed, more muted, less polished. The spark she once carried into every room had flickered out. And still, she never apologized. Not really. Not for the betrayal. Not for the lies. Not for turning me into a prisoner in my own home. She only apologized for the consequences. She was sorry she got caught. Sorry someone reported it. Sorry Logan was suspended. But never once did she say, "I hurt you," and that told me everything I still needed to know. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was waiting for the final crack, the one that would bring down the whole structure. And it was coming. Because Brooke still didn't realize that every move she made was inside a game I had already mastered. And soon she wouldn't be playing anymore. The second report I submitted included timestamps, receipts, internal chats. Logan was fired. Brooke placed on indefinite leave. Her image at the company shattered. She cried, begged, blamed stress, claimed misunderstanding. But her lies collapsed under documented truth. I didn't comfort her. I had my lawyer, my own accounts, and no more patience for manipulation. Her downfall wasn't my revenge. It was her reflection. A month later, she signed the divorce papers and left without a word. No drama, no final plea, just silence. I changed the locks, canceled everything with her name on it, and deleted the last photo of us from my phone. The apartment was finally still. No perfume, no tension, just space. I wasn't bitter. I was awake. She made her choices. I made mine. And for the first time in years, I belonged to no one but myself. And that felt like peace.